Hello, health champions. Today we're going to talk about some common mistakes that people make with intermittent fasting that could actually make you gain weight instead of losing it. So let's make sure that you don't make any of these. One common mistake that people make is that they overeat after the fast, and that is because they feel deprived in some form, and then after the fast they overcompensate and they overeat. Usually this comes down to some very common factors. And if they don't really change what they're eating, they're just eating the same types of food, but they're restricting the window, and a lot of those foods are going to be low quality and processed foods. Now the body isn't getting the proper nutrition, so it's going to be screaming for food during the fast, and then you overcompensate after. And then there are three things that go hand in hand, so we're going to cover those together. One is that you eat too high of a carb diet. You keep eating high carb even when you're fasting. One is that you change too quickly from what you were doing. And the third is that you go directly from a low-fat, high-carb diet, a standard diet, straight into intermittent fasting. So we need to understand how those three factors affect blood sugar and energy production. So when you eat a high-carbohydrate diet, your blood sugar will rise very quickly, and then the body releases insulin to bring it down because the body doesn't like high blood sugar. Really high and really low blood sugar is very dangerous. So it's going to produce a lot of insulin that brings the blood sugar down, and then when it's low, now you get cravings and you eat again and so forth. So you keep getting this blood sugar roller coaster, and this is very much related to processed foods, to high sugar foods, and to high carb foods. And what happens then is that you train your body to depend on these blood sugar spikes, because when they're low, you feel bad, so now you eat more, but then as soon as the blood sugar is high, your body has to use up that energy and bring that blood sugar down. So you get stuck in this dependency on high carbohydrate foods and cravings. And then if you go straight into intermittent fasting, your body doesn't know where to get the energy. And then you have high energy when the blood sugar is high, you have low energy and low mood when it's low. And that's not sustainable. Whereas if you instead eat a low carb diet with your intermittent fasting plans, now as you also eat real food with protein and fat, nuts and seeds, meat, vegetables, now your blood sugar swings are going to be almost non-existent. So you have a very, very stable energy production, and now it's very easy to go 8 hours, 16 hours without food, and you're not going to lose energy. And you've trained your body into using fat for energy, and that's what your body uses when you fast. So it's not necessary for everyone to go low carb when you do intermittent fasting. Some people pull it off even though they eat relatively high carb. But for a lot of people, they're not going to manage it. They're not going to succeed eating a high carb because it's going to be too difficult for them. And for most people, it's going to be much, much easier to do intermittent fasting and continue and have a long-term success if you keep your blood sugar much more level with low carb foods. Another problem can be bulletproof coffee. And don't get me wrong, I am a fan of bulletproof coffee, but we can't let it get out of hand. And we have to understand that it's a tool, it's not a benefit, meaning that if you compare bulletproof coffee to fasting completely, then it's not better. It doesn't do anything additionally that fasting alone couldn't do. And the most common question I get is, does it break a fast and does it raise insulin? And does it break a fast? Absolutely, it breaks a fast, because a fast is when you're not eating anything. But the benefit, the good thing about it, is that it raises insulin just a tiny, tiny bit. It raises it so little, so it's almost like you didn't eat. And I am a fan of bulletproof coffee if it helps you go longer. So if you were getting tired and you got listless or nauseous or whatever, or you just felt like you really had to have something, and then the question was, am I going to eat, or can I get another 4 or 6 or 8 hours of fasting until dinner? Will it help me do OMAD, 1 meal a day, if I have some bulletproof coffee? Because then it's a good thing. It just gets a little blip on your insulin and then you're back to fasting. The problem is when it becomes a fad and a trend and people don't understand where it fits in to fasting. So now we have thousands of people putting up recipes online about all these great things, and people are having 1 and 2 and 3 bulletproof coffees because they think more is better. That if bulletproof coffee is okay, or if it's good, then more must be better. They put butter in there, they put MCT oil and heavy cream, and I've even seen recipes with egg and collagen. And none of those are horrible, but they're not really necessary either. So you just do enough to get you by. And if you have 2 tablespoons of butter, for example, now that adds a couple of 100 calories. A tablespoon of MCT oil is 120 calories. 2 tablespoons of cream is another 100 calories. 1 egg is 80 calories, and a scoop of collagen powder would be probably about 50 calories. So I think it's okay if bulletproof coffee has 200, 250 calories, that's great. But if you have 400, 500 calories and you have a couple of those a day, now that's a meal. That's 2 meals, and you're not really fasting anymore. And the fat is there to carry you over, not to have you eat so much fat that your body has no reason to burn it off the body. So that's where bulletproof coffee can be a problem when it gets out of hand, when it becomes a meal. Now, there are 2 kinds of mistakes that could make you gain weight with intermittent fasting. And the first 2 things we talked about are things like overeating and too much bulletproof coffee. That could actually make you gain weight directly. But then the other way is if you make it so hard that you're going to quit, if you don't understand to turn this into a lifestyle that is sustainable. Now, if you quit fasting, intermittent fasting, now you gain the weight back because you're not doing the right things anymore. And intermittent fasting is not supposed to be hard, but we have this mentality that of no pain, no gain. We go to the gym, and if it's not hurting, it can't be good, right? But then that mentality sometimes carries over, and now we think that it's the hunger that's going to give us the results. And we feel absolutely terrible, and we say, oh my God, I'm both hungry and I feel deprived, and then I must be doing it right. And we got to get past that kind of thinking, all right? It's not supposed to be hard. If it's too difficult, if we feel miserable, then we're not going to turn it into a lifestyle, and then we fail. Another thing that can make us feel really bad is dehydration. And the 2 parts to that, one is that we're not drinking enough water, but the second part is that we're not taking enough electrolytes, because electrolytes are charged little particles, little molecules that bind water, that hold the water. So the body uses electrolytes to regulate fluid balance in the body. And if we're not taking any, then we can be losing water even though we're drinking a lot of water. And the most important electrolyte to take is just salt, plain salt, called sodium chloride. I do recommend typically that you get sea salt or pink Himalayan salt. Those are my favorites. But then it's also a really good idea that if you supplement also with some potassium, some magnesium, and some calcium, as well as some trace minerals, especially if you end up doing a little bit more intermittent fasting on a regular basis, or maybe you go a little bit longer once in a while, like more than 24 hours. And because this is such a common problem, I developed a product to support fasting called Ulite, and I'll put a link down below if you want to check that out. Another thing that can actually make you gain weight is poor sleep, and hand in hand with that is high stress, because anytime you wake up after poor sleep or insufficient sleep, now your cortisol is going to be elevated. And the same thing with any type of stress. Anytime that your body perceives that you are in danger, then you're going to be activating the fight-flight response. And anytime that your body perceives danger, it thinks, well, I might have to run. If there's a bear or a tiger around the corner, then I might have to run. So I might need a little extra blood sugar. And that's what the cortisol is for. Cortisol raises that blood sugar. And historically, that was a great thing because we are in danger, we raise the blood sugar, and now the muscles will absorb that blood sugar, and then we move, we run, we fight, and we use up that blood sugar. That's the purpose, that's the balance that resets everything. But modern people, we don't get that movement. We are feeling stressed sitting in a car. We're feeling stressed sitting at a desk. There's no additional energy expenditure. And now that cortisol raises blood sugar, and now with that extra blood sugar and no movement, the body also raises insulin. And now we're promoting metabolic imbalances with that extra stress and that extra cortisol. And of course, when you don't move and you handle that elevated glucose with insulin, now that glucose is going to turn into fat. And whenever insulin is elevated and we store it as fat, now we can't retrieve it and we get hungry. So now we end up eating more, we get more cravings, and that's what happens with excess cortisol. And two really powerful ways to deal with this stress to help the body reset is to do some breathing exercises and to do some meditation. And it doesn't take very long. If you get your body used to doing this and you notice that you're feeling a little stressed, you could take 30 seconds of breathing exercises and reset the body. Another problem is if we exercise wrong. So one thing could be if we just exercise too much, period. But very commonly, we just exercise at too high a level for too long. And that matters because we use the wrong type of fuel. And we really want to understand that it's not about calories. Everywhere you look, there's such stupid advice that if you eat a cookie with 100 calories, then you have to walk so many minutes or you have to run so many minutes. That is just not how it works at all. Get that out of your head forever. What you're trying to do is to burn fat. And you burn fat during aerobic exercise. Whenever you switch to anaerobic exercise, now you're shifting from fat burning to carbohydrate. Because anytime that you get into anaerobic exercise, you're going to be shifting to a fuel source called glycolysis. And here's how that works. So let's say that you're in pretty good shape and you have a resting heart rate of about 60. And let's say that at rest, you're using up that much energy. And then as you start exercising, your body needs more energy. And this energy comes primarily from burning fat and using oxygen. So the blood provides that oxygen, you're oxidizing the fat, and you're making energy. And then as you make more and more energy, your heart rate goes up so you can provide more oxygen. So once you get to about 120, you're close to maxing out how much oxygen the blood can carry. So here you have doubled your heart rate, but you've also increased how much blood is pumped for every heartbeat because the heart stretches a little bit. So now you're pumping about 3 to 4 times as much blood. And here, there's still enough oxygen to completely cover the need to make energy. So far, you are in what we're calling aerobic, with air, that all the energy is covered by oxygen supplied in real time. But now, if you start going faster, now your heart rate is going to increase further. And that's a sign that once you start huffing and puffing, now you're not taking in, the blood cannot deliver enough air, enough oxygen. So anything above here is going to be anaerobic. And now you're not burning primarily fat anymore. Now you're still burning the same amount of fat at the bottom as the base, but anything extra, you're going to be using carbohydrate, and you're switching to another energy pathway called glycolysis. And the way you can tell is that you're huffing and puffing, your muscles start burning because this glycolysis, you're breaking down glucose and you turn that into lactic acid. That burn in the muscle, that's the lactic acid from anaerobic metabolism. And now the problem is that fat burning with oxygen is very, very efficient because you're going to be producing 38 ATP per unit of energy that you're using up, per unit of fat. But when you switch to glycolysis, to carbohydrate, now you're only getting 2 ATP. So to get this extra energy, you're going to be using up a lot of carbohydrate fairly quickly. And if you're using up carbohydrate quickly, what does the body have to do? It has to look for more. So now you're making cortisol at very high levels. So anytime that you get into this zone, you're going to automatically kick in the cortisol at pretty high levels. Now, even though you're making massive amounts of cortisol, this can be beneficial if this anaerobic is very, very brief. That's called high intensity interval training. So if you do that all out, like a maximum effort for about 30 seconds, and you keep the total of intervals down to just a few minutes, now you're getting tremendous benefits. And the drawback is not so much because even though you're in this anaerobic zone, it's such a short time that the benefits far outweigh the drawbacks. However, if you go to a spin class, or if you go huffing and puffing, or you do something for 30, 40 minutes or an hour, now you spend so much time in that anaerobic zone, you're making so much cortisol that you're also going to drive up your insulin. And when you do a lot of this, you also will get increased cravings to replenish all of that carbohydrate that you used up. So we have to understand that if we do things the hard way, that if we struggle and make it complicated and difficult, then we all end up quitting. Whereas if we learn how to do it right, now you can set yourself up for long-term success, for a lifestyle change. Another problem can be hypoglycemia. And for the most part, it's not the hypoglycemia itself. That's kind of rare that it becomes a problem, but it is the fear. It's an inappropriate fear sometimes. Like someone asked me, how do I do this? Every time I try to do one meal a day, my blood glucose drops below 70 and I have to eat something. Because we've been warned, we've been scared of hypoglycemia, like that's a terrible thing. But when you're fasting, you're burning mostly fat. And when you're mostly in fat burning, especially if you're low carb, now you make ketones. That's an alternate fuel. So your body doesn't need as much blood glucose and it's not a problem. When I do a longer fast, I sometimes get down into the 50s. I know a lot of people get into the 40s. And as long as you feel good, it's not a problem. But I want to tell you about a study that they did one time where they took a group of young, healthy men and they fasted them for 3, 4, 5 days, and their blood glucose levels were in the 40s and 50s. And then they injected them with insulin to force the blood glucose dramatically low just to see what happened. And one guy got the glucose down to 9, and most of them were between 15 and 20. And nothing happened. None of them displayed symptoms of hypoglycemia. They still felt good because their bodies, their brains were running on ketones. So your body doesn't need as much glucose when you're fat adapted and when you're fasting. But the people who really need to be careful about hypoglycemia are type 2 diabetics on insulin and type 1 diabetics who are also obviously on insulin. If you're not on insulin, then all you have to do is to pay attention to how you feel. Because if you're a type 2 diabetic, if you're taking insulin and you stop eating, now that insulin will be just like the study I mentioned. It will force the blood sugar super, super low. And that can be dangerous if you're not used to fasting. But if you're not on insulin, then you just have to pay attention to how you feel. Are you feeling good? Are you clear-headed? Do you have energy? Or are you dizzy? Are you lightheaded? And if you start feeling off in any way, then the first thing that you do is you drink some water and you have some salt or some electrolytes with it. And if it doesn't pick up almost immediately where you're feeling better, then you go eat something. And then next time that you try intermittent fasting again, you go a little bit slower at it, or you make sure that you're a little better fat adapted and you follow all these other rules that we talked about. But the biggest reason people fail to develop a lifestyle of intermittent fasting is probably that they don't understand enough about it. If they have a lack of knowledge, if they don't understand how the body works, then you just need to study a little bit more, because more understanding of these things will create a better expectation, a more realistic expectation. And the best way to gain a better understanding is, of course, to watch a lot more of my videos. And if you enjoyed this video, you're going to love that one. And if you truly want to master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, and turn on all the notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.